a big smile, give me your full first name, your last name, your age, and where you are.
This is Greg Steinberg. I'm 49 years old, and I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay, tell me, what do you do, Greg?
I'm a professor of sports psychology. I teach sports psychology. I do sports psychology. I work with professional athletes. I coach them on mental and emotional toughness. I also coach CEOs of businesses. I work with musicians. I write books. I write articles. Basically, I'm involved in the mental toughness game.
Okay, I love it. Tell me about the mental toughness game.
Well, we call it mental toughness because that's kind of the cliche, but actually it's the emotional toughness game that I really promote because I believe the most successful people have mastered their emotions. Yeah, sure, thinking is important, but thinking doesn't drive the engine. It's the emotions that drive the engine. And if you have the right emotions, if you are a master of your emotions, you're going to perform your best regardless if you're an elite athlete, a business executive, or a musician.
Okay, awesome. And now, tell me, give me your credentials. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay. I went to UC Santa Barbara, I majored in psychology, got my BS in psychology. Then I went to Florida State and got my master's in educational psychology, sports psychology. And then I have my PhD from Florida, University of Florida, and I got that in human performance / sports psychology. And now I'm a professor, a full professor at Austin Peay State University, which is a state university just outside Nashville.
Are you renowned? Do you travel? Do you speak? Anything like that? I want to know how much of an expert in your field you are.
Yes, I travel the globe speaking on mental and emotional toughness. I speak to businesses, Fortune 500 companies like Boeing International, like Hughes International. I speak to Bank of America. I speak to Merrill Lynch. I also work with professional athletes, some of the greatest golfers in the world like Brandt Snedeker, Brian Gay, Chris Couch. I've worked with NBA players like Trent Hassel. I worked with NFL players like Wes Britt. So basically, across the gamut, I do it all in terms of coaching these people to be more successful in any field they do. I also write books. I have 3 books. I've written Mental Rules for Golf, which is a golf psychology book. I've written Flying Lessons, which is a parent book, which teaches parents how to build mental and emotional toughness in their kids. And I also have written Full Throttle, which is a business psychology book. Currently, I write a mental game column for the PGAtour.com, and I do a weekly radio show for the PGA Tour radio network on XM Sirius. And Golf Digest has ranked me one of the greatest sports psychologists in the world.
Well, that's not too bad. You're one of the greatest sports psychologists in the world. What has gained you that distinction? Have you done any particular studies? Has there been any particular success?
Well, I've worked with some of the greatest golfers in the world, written articles for Golf Digest, written a very successful golf psychology book. And, based on that, they ranked me one of the greatest golf psychologists, sports psychologists in the world.
Wonderful. Okay. So tell me, we just want to do something, just sort of create like a character for you. Like, first, would you mind explaining in depth what you do using technical jargon? We really want to have that. We want to have what might be perceived as unintelligible terms. And just trust me on that because it really helps me form my questions afterwards.
So you said technical jargon?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what I've discovered in all my work, in my research, coaching the greatest athletes and business executives in the world, is that they are successful because they can raise their game under pressure by falling back into these great emotions. And what people do when they choke and they perform their worst is they fall back into their bad habits. And we go to our habits under pressure. And what I've discovered and what I do with the people I work with is create these great emotional habits, because they will fall back into these great emotional habits under pressure. And that's how they raise their game. People always ask me, how do the greatest athletes in the world like Roger Federer or Venus Williams raise their game under pressure? Well, they don't ultimately raise their game. They just fall back into these great emotional habits so they can get more focused, they can get more confident, they can really be calm under pressure because they have these great emotional habits. And we return to our habits under pressure. And that is the greatest difference between the good and the great. The great have great emotional habits, and the good only have good emotional habits. And the ones that choke have bad emotional habits.
Okay. And technical jargon. Can you talk more like in terms of like what I do is I study, I don't know, the something theorem, something like that. Like make it technical terms. It'll really help me along when I try to form my question.
Okay, so you want a theory? Is that what you're talking about?
Tell me what you do in the most technical terms of how you do it.
Well, what I do is I understand the emotions of a person when they're performing their best. And I break that down into certain emotional strengths. So I look at their emotional awareness. I have to understand when they're performing their best, what emotions they had and what thoughts they had, and ultimately what situations push their emotions in a certain direction, and then ultimately what emotions they had when they were performing their worst. And then what I do is I figure out ways to push their buttons, which we call emotional primers, which are words, actions, and images, which ultimately push their emotions in the right direction. And when we figure out these emotional primers, we create routines that they use over and over again prior to a performance setting, so that ultimately these great emotions become a habit. And so ultimately they will push their emotions in the right direction because we've incorporated these emotional primers into their habit, their everyday life. And therefore, they will develop great emotional habits. And that's how you raise your game under pressure, by falling back into these great emotional habits.
Very nice. Okay, excellent. So, can you tell me, give me like your non-scientist side. What is it about your profession that you just love, and I really want you to speak out about it?
Well, what I love about my profession is everybody focuses on the physical side of life, you know, the beauty, the outward beauty. But to me, what makes people so successful is this inner beauty, this inner feeling, this inner thought that you can't see. It's the mental game. It's the emotional game. Everybody says, how much of success is mental and how much is it physical? Well, I say it's 100% mental and 100% physical and 100% emotional. They are totally tied into each other. When you're thinking well, you're feeling well, and when you're feeling well, you're playing well. And on the flip side, when you're thinking bad, you're going to feel bad, and then ultimately you're going to play bad. So they're totally interconnected. Most people only work on one side, which is the physical aspect of their game or their life. They don't work on the emotional side or the mental side. And it's like only working on one half of your skill set, or only working with one half of your arm. You got to work with both arms to be successful, because success is 100% mental, 100% physical, and 100% emotional.
Fantastic. But you know that this show is going to be a real experimentation. We're going to drive people to their limits, just really see how far people can go in terms of mental and physical toughness. What gets you excited? I mean, we are going to have you push them to their limits and, you know, talk about areas where they fail, as well as areas where they succeed. But I feel like we've been talking about success a lot. So tell me, what are you looking forward to? What are you looking forward to with this show? And where are areas where you're going to, like, just really push things and really get excited about it?
Well, people choke they perform their worst because they can't deal with anxiety. They can't deal with the pressure. Anxiety is like this fire. It can either heat up your house or burn your house down. And most people cannot deal with anxiety. They choke because they don't know how to deal with the emotional aspects of anxiety. They don't know how to deal with the images to use. They don't know how to deal with the right words. And ultimately, anxiety overcomes them and wipes them out. The secret is being comfortable in the uncomfortable. People are always going to be nervous, regardless of setting. If it's important to you, you are going to be nervous. But the secret is you have to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And a lot of people can't do that. They can't remain calm under pressure. They can't remain focused under pressure because they are uncomfortable in the uncomfortable. But the secret is you have to remain calm, cool, and collected under intense pressure. And that is the difference between the good and the great. The good can't handle the pressure. When the heater's on, they choke. But the great ones can handle the pressure. It's like a leaky pipe phenomenon. Picture a leaky pipe that has cracks in its fundamentals. Well, if you have water flowing through that pipe, just gently, that pipe will not leak. But once you put a lot of pressure on that pipe will leak all over the place. Well, that's the same principle. When you have cracks in your fundamental, whether they're physical cracks, mental cracks, or emotional cracks, that person will leak all over the place. So you have to plug up those cracks so that you can handle the pressure.
Excellent. Now, part of this show is also going to be pushing some people to not succeed, and actually putting people in positions where they normally wouldn't succeed, and seeing just how these people handle it. I know that a big part of your job right now is helping people to succeed, and that's great. Is there any part of you that's going to be really interested to see failure as well, and what about it is interests you, and how do you think that might, inform you and perhaps inform future work?
Well, if you look at the limits of success, you also have to look at the other side, which is the limits of choking or performing your best. It's really important to understand how to push people to the limits of their choking, let's say the ceiling effect of their choking ability. And if you can push them in that direction and you can understand what situations cause people to choke, what images cause people to choke, what competitive fires cause people to choke, then you can ultimately understand how people are successful. And what I'm really interested in is if you push these people to the limit, for instance, there's going to be a rage of hormones such as norepinephrine, epinephrine. These rage in their body and they're from the fight or flight response. And you're going to understand how much of these hormones can they handle the pressure. That means how much of this anxiety will push them to be so out of whack, so under fire because of the anxiety. You'll be able to understand how much of pressure will they be able to handle before they just burn out and they just quit the show.
Is there any part about that you think is going to be fun or interesting? I'm not trying to make you diabolical unless you've got a diabolical side.
Well, of course it's interesting to understand why people choke and watching people choke. I mean, we're all interested in seeing very successful people do poorly. And what's really interesting is to see why they choke. Are they choking because of the situation? Are they choking because they can't handle the skill? Are they choking because they have the right thoughts or they have the wrong images? And so to watch them choke will be so fascinating to myself as well as the viewers because you're seeing these successful people choke under pressure, perform poorly under pressure. And the idea here is if you can understand why people choke under pressure, you can flip that around and understand how to make people who are normal be hugely successful when the pressure comes, because everybody faces pressure. Pressure is relative. I don't care who you are, if you're an elite athlete, you're the CEO of a business, or a housewife, pressure is relative. And if you can handle the pressure, then you're going to be successful in your life. So to understand how successful people cannot handle the pressure, that just leads us to understanding how normal people can handle the pressure more effectively.
Fantastic. So what do you think? Do you think this show sounds like fun?
This show is a perfect fit for me because I love to understand how people compete under pressure. That's what I've been studying for 30 years is peak performance under pressure, because I've realized that anxiety is public enemy number one. Anxiety destroys lives, it destroys performance, it burns us out. And if we can understand how people can perform their best under pressure, under intense anxiety situations, then we can understand ultimately how to fix that. Because I believe that when you can deal with anxiety, when you can deal with your fears, when you can deal with all those expectations and how people feel about you, then ultimately you're going to be at your best, regardless of situation.
And seriously, I mean, don't be afraid to be a kid in a candy store. Doesn't sound fun.
Oh yeah. Well, of course it sounds fun. I've been studying peak performance for 30 years. How could it not be fun? I mean, it's basically a virtual laboratory that I can understand anxiety in a real situation. I can understand how anxiety affects these very successful people. So it is a mad laboratory which I can really understand. I can gain research from, I can gain facts from, and ultimately it'll allow everyone to understand how people deal with pressure in a real life situation, which we rarely get to study.
Fantastic. You did great. Love it. You can stop recording.